Andy Kaufman, a skinny comedian with no athletic ability, he starts wrestling.
I'll take on anybody who wants to come in that ring and volunteer. I'm gonna send you back to the kitchen where you belong.
He didn't care if the people hated him. He wanted to get a reaction. This is soap. You put water on it and you rub it all over your body. Jerry Lawler gets the microphone and says, "Hey, instead of calling him an ambulance, why don't you call him a taxi?" I'm Jim Cornette. I was there when Jerry the King Lawler and Andy Kaufman set the pro wrestling world on its ear and started 40 years of debate. Was it real or was it not? I first became aware of Andy Kaufman. Like everybody else in the country, he started doing television. He wasn't a stand-up comic. He didn't go out and tell jokes. He created characters that you couldn't really tell whether it was him or not. The first time that people saw Andy on television, he did The Foreign Man. So many people were convinced that he was really from Bulgaria somewhere, and that is what led him to get the role as Latka on Taxi.
Forget I said anything. I don't know what I'm talking about.
At that point, he became one of the hottest comedians in the country, even though he was really more of a performance artist. Andy Kaufman was a wrestling fan from the time he was a kid in New York, and his favorite professional wrestler was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers invented a lot of the tactics that the bad guy heel wrestler would use to taunt the fans and the opponents, and Andy was mesmerized by this. He saw the art in the performance, and he starts wrestling on television, talk shows, and Saturday Night Live, and wherever he can, but he wrestled women.
I'm gonna send you back to the kitchen where you belong. I'm gonna have you scrubbing the potatoes.
He understood that pro wrestling was about manipulating people's emotions, but what he really wanted to do was do this on a real professional wrestling event. He goes to Madison Square Garden and asks the promoter of at the time, the WWF, Vince McMahon Sr., the current Vince McMahon's father. And Vince McMahon Sr. turned Andy Kaufman down. He was afraid that it would make wrestling look phony. A comedian, a skinny TV star coming in and wrestling with my talent, just wasn't interested. That night at Madison Square Garden, one of the photographers at ringside was Bill Apter. And Bill gets on the phone, it's midnight, and he calls Jerry Lawler in Memphis. Before the WWE went national, wrestling was a series of geographical, regional territories. Every territory in wrestling had its own style, and Memphis was crazy fights. Memphis was brawling. Memphis was over-the-top violence, but with a level of entertainment and occasionally comedy. Memphis wrestling was a cultural institution, and Jerry Lawler was the biggest box office attraction and the #1 star in the Memphis wrestling territory. And Lawler had just come in from one of their wrestling matches that night when Bill called, and he said, "I got Andy Kaufman here." And Lawler, "What?" "He wants to wrestle." "What?" So the night of the match comes, and the first 1 or 2 or 3 ladies, they were intimidated. They've never done anything like this before. They're dressed in their street clothes. And then, Andy would pin them. But the last lady was named Foxy. And the people started getting behind her because Andy started having a little more trouble. At one point, she even got on top of him, and then the crowd just blew. So the next week, the next Monday night, the people come to see, can Foxy beat Andy Kaufman? And this time, Andy's huffing and puffing. There was a few points where the people thought that it looked like Foxy had him, but finally, he prevails over Foxy. Jerry Lawler gets in the ring and just grabs a hold of Andy to pull him back, and Andy goes with it and flies across the ring. And the place blows. All the people cheer. And that's when Lawler got that little twinkle in his eye and said, this can be even bigger. Lawler gets the idea. He says, "I think we can have a single match between me and Andy Kaufman. First, we got to get the heat up." Andy starts sending in videos from California by poolside that are played on the Memphis Wrestling Show. "How dare you put your hands on me, Mr. Lawler? What, some kind of hillbilly from Memphis, Tennessee.
All we do is plow the fields and farm. I am from Hollywood.
I'm from Hollywood, Mr. Lawler. I'm a TV star. You can't treat me like that. So, meanwhile, Lawler is taking the realistic tack. He said, I don't know what this guy's problem is. I don't know why he hates the people of Tennessee. I don't know why he acts this way. Well, I'm going to promise you, Andy Kaufman, it's going to be the last time you ever make fun of wrestling, because I'm going to fix you, son. I'm going to prove that all these preconceived notions you have about professional wrestling, that's all crap. And then finally, the challenge is made for a match. A network TV star, one of the hottest comedians in the country, is going to fight a pro wrestler at the Mid-South Coliseum on Monday night, and for $5 we can get in and see it. Boom goes the dynamite. Right? So the night of the match was April 5th, 1982, and I was there to shoot pictures at ringside. Lawler comes out, and here comes Andy. He would taunt Lawler, like, you big ape. And then he would run and jump out of the ring, or he'd duck away, or he'd back up. And finally, Lawler gets out and grabs the microphone and says, hey, did you come here to wrestle, or did you come here to act like an ass? And the people just cheer. Lawler says, hey, come here. He puts his hands behind his back, and he sticks his head out, and he says, I'll give you a free one. Grab me in a headlock. And Andy starts looking around, and all the people are screaming, yeah, do it, do it, do it. And finally, he kind of tentatively, he reaches over, he grabs Lawler in a headlock like this, and he starts squeezing. And Lawler, he's bent over, and his head's in Andy's grip, and he just raises his finger behind Andy's back. Like, just wait a minute, and all the people see, oh, Andy's not hurting him. Watch this. And he reaches down and picks Andy up in what we call a back suplex. And he just picks him straight up and drops him straight back, and Andy folded up like an accordion. And then Lawler goes, I'm gonna show this guy. And Jerry Lawler's most deadly move was the pile driver. And the pile driver is such a dangerous hold, it was banned by the Athletic Commission. So when Lawler grabs Andy and picks him up and boom, gives him that big pile driver, the referee rings the bell. Andy Kaufman is the winner of the match by disqualification, but now Andy is laying there, yes, on the mat selling, and Lawler hears the response from the people, grabs him, picks him up, and gives him another. And laying there in the middle of the Mid-South Coliseum in the wrestling ring is one of the biggest network TV stars in the country. The referee comes over, and he's just checked on Andy, and Andy says he wants an ambulance. Lawler gets the microphone and says, hey, instead of calling him an ambulance, why don't you call him a taxi? And the people are cheering, oh yes, this is the greatest thing we've ever seen. And the ambulance comes in, and they get him on the board, and they get him on the gurney. As they're wheeling him to the ambulance, people are trying to, with their feet, trying to kick the stretcher over. And I'm shooting pictures everywhere. I'm trying not to step on people while I'm trying to follow this gurney back to the ambulance. And the ambulance pulling out of the back of the Coliseum got another ovation from the crowd. Nobody left until they saw Andy all the way out the back door. He wore the neck brace for months. Every time he was out in public, you saw him in that neck brace. So now he comes out and he says, I always thought wrestling was all fun and games, and it wasn't to be taken seriously, but now I understand I was wrong. Wrestling is real. He said all those horrible things, and he got his ass handed to him for it, and now he's trying to claim he's the victim. And so finally, they're booked on the David Letterman show. But the Letterman producers, they don't know anything about wrestling. They figure it's all fun and games. So they wanted Jerry and Andy to get together and put their arms around each other and sing, What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love. Jerry and Andy said, well, let's just not do that, but they didn't tell anybody. They got together in the back and they started thinking, well, what could we do? This is not our normal stomping grounds. What can we get away with? They start doing the bit on the set. Andy said something to the effect of, well, I'm not that kind of guy that I would do this to you. And Lawler looked at him and said, what kind of guy are you? And the people in the studio are liking this. It's entertaining. It's a little uncomfortable.
Did you laugh after when you were laying in the hospital? Was a joke then?
But finally, you can tell that Letterman sees that it's not going the direction that they thought it was going to go. They heard the bumper music playing, and they knew that they were about to go to the break. And Jerry at that point said, well, guess if I'm going to do this, this is time to do it. So Andy had hit him with some wise-ass remark, and Lawler just stood up and stood in front of Andy, who's looking up at him, and pow! He just slapped the shit out of him. We go to the commercial. Come back 3 minutes later, and there's David Letterman sitting there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and Lawler is still on the set. Then Andy comes back from the wings and is cussing a blue streak. He cuts this rant on Lawler, who's sitting there just looking at him.
I'll sue your ass. You're a motherfucking asshole.
And then finally he grabs Letterman's coffee cup off the desk and throws coffee on Lawler. And Andy runs off again. Letterman's like, well, I think some of those words are allowed on network television, ladies and gentlemen, but I've said it a million times, you cannot throw coffee. At that point, Andy and Lawler were kind of inextricably linked together. The last time or two that Andy was down to do the shows, he had kind of a cough, and shortly after, he passed away. After he died, his family found the paychecks that Jerry Jarrett and Jarrett Promotions had written for his appearances, but Andy never cashed the checks. He framed them. There were always long-running rivalries, but this was something that made national news, even though it just happened in Memphis, because of Andy's notoriety. And that was 2 years before Vince McMahon Jr. took over from his father and went national with wrestling and started making everybody big national stars. And it kind of always ate Vince Jr. that his dad had the chance to do this first and turned it down because he thought it'd make wrestling look silly. Andy Kaufman, being a comedian, he and Lawler did more to make people believe wrestling was real than anything else that had been done in the past 30 years. Wrestling is real. And they bought it because they saw the evidence in front of them. Anyway, I guess we should do this on tape.
That was.
Was that on tape? Well, there you go.